This is an in-depth analysis of the real estate market conditions for Silicon Valley real estate market, focusing on the housing market trends. I'm an active real estate agent here in the Bay Area real estate market, servicing Santa Clara County, San Mateo County, and Alameda County. We will examine active listings and offers accepted opposed to all inventory and pending sales. The speed of the market is objectively measured using days of unsold inventory. We will look at the seller's ask price reductions, both the magnitude and the frequency, as well as the buyer's overbidding. We will track appreciation since 2015, and instead of just looking at the median or average days on the market, I'll focus on the typical days to sell a listing here in Silicon Valley. Not only do I track the commonly used median sold price, but I also sandwich that with the lower and upper prices. Pink reflects a hot seller's market, and blue reflects a cool buyer's market. I'm Richard Calhoun, a real estate broker and realtor with Creekside Realty. For repeat visitors, you may want to skip to the first data slide. Micromarket areas covered are Cupertino, Sunnyvale, Saratoga, Los Gatos, Montecito, Los Altos Hills, Palo Alto, Cambrian, Campbell, Santa Clara, Willow Glen, Milpitas, Berryessa, Evergreen, Blossom Valley, Santa Teresa, Mountain View, Redwood City, Menlo Park, Foster City, Redwood Shores, Burlingame, San Carlos, Belmont, Millbrae, San Mateo, Hillsborough, Atherton, Woodside, Portola Valley, Half Moon Bay, Livermore, Dublin, Pleasanton, Fremont, Newark, Union City, Almaden Valley, San Jose, Rose Garden, Alum Rock, Morgan Hill, Gilroy, and San Martin.
Repeat visitors may want to jump through the 90-second introduction. Here's the first data slide. What we're looking at here is the active inventory compared to the 10-year median. You can see the bulk of Silicon Valley, 3 counties, Santa Clara County, San Mateo, and Alameda counties are at 100 or close enough to 100% that they get no color. Santa Clara County is sort of the exception, and that's still a shortage of inventory. Shortage of inventory favors the seller, and that's why it's red in color. Moving on to offers. Now, this is not what you would necessarily expect. Here's a shortage of offers. So even though we have normal inventory now, we're still having a shortage of offers. That, if it continues for any length of period of time, will slow the market down. You can see Santa Clara County, a lot of the areas at 100%, but most of these areas I would say are somewhere around 75%. So we're missing about 25% of the buyers still, even though inventory is still coming back. Then we're going to look at days of unsold inventory. You can see Alameda County is just over 100%. So that's a normal marketplace, just a tad slower than normal. San Mateo County is quite a bit slower when you look at it, 154%, 190%. Yes, Foster City is 74%, but that's a very small micro market area. It's probably only got, probably less than a dozen houses. So in general, San Mateo County is becoming significantly above 100%, which means a slower marketplace. That should, in a free economy, mean lower prices. Santa Clara County is sort of, again, the hot spot where we're basically around 80% of the speed of the marketplace you'd expect. So it's 20% faster than you would expect. This is looking at days of unsold inventory, just raw count, no longer comparing it to the 10-year median. Here you can see everything is red, but remember, Silicon Valley has been in a seller's marketplace for a long time. But again, these are very respectable numbers. Basically, Santa Clara County is 15 to 30 days. San Mateo County is probably more like 25. There's 40 days here and 80 days on the coast and then 90 days in the expensive area. So it's a wider range. It goes all the way from 30 to 90 days. And then Alameda County is much more like Santa Clara County, but maybe a little bit slower, with maybe the number I'd pick is 20 days. Obviously, there's some slow spots like San Leandro, San Lorenzo, and Hayward, as well as Oakland, where you're both at about 60 days of unsold inventory. Now, this might make a little bit more sense for the consumer. It's simply, what is the long typical time does it take for a seller to sell their property? And this only looks at the successful sellers. Days of unsold inventory includes the unsuccessful sellers because you're looking at inventory. I'm looking at days on market, not of the active inventory, but of the offers that are accepted. So this number is going to be much lower. You can see Santa Clara County is basically right around 10 days. San Mateo County is probably 12 to 20 days. And Alameda County is sort of in between 12 to 15 days, with Oakland being the exception at 29 days. And I think Oakland is actually the longest period of the entire 3-county area. So, and that's still pretty reasonable. It's 3/4 of your sellers are selling your home in under a month, and many of them are selling it in under 2 weeks. That's a pretty fast-paced marketplace. Here's the ask price adjustments. This is looking at the average ask price adjustments, so the numbers are fairly small, and that's because a large percentage of the sellers make no adjustment. One, because they don't have time. Two, they do their homework before they put their house on the marketplace. You can see Santa Clara County, very small price adjustments. You know, the biggest ones I'm seeing is South County at 1.2, followed by 0.6. Oh, Saratoga Las Gatas at 1.7, so that's actually the biggest. And then on the expensive areas are 0.7. So that's 0.7%. And again, that's not the typical seller taking 0.7% reduction. That's 10–15% of the sellers taking a more significant price reduction. You come up into San Mateo County, and it's sort of interesting that even though it's a slower county, sellers there are not adjusting their price. It could be that San Mateo County is coming back to life, and sellers have looking in the rearview mirror a little bit and seeing the market slow and pricing their properties a little bit on the low side. For whatever reason, the price reductions in San Mateo County are very small. And then Alameda County, again, is very much more like Santa Clara County with probably less of a range. The highest discount I'm seeing is in Oakland with 0.6, but 0.4 is way more common. You got 3 micro market areas, 3 out of 7 micro market areas at 0.4. You got San Leandro and Hayward at 0.5. And as I've already talked, Oakland at 0.6. Now, this is the frequency of ask price reductions. So how common? And again, my color scheme is red favors the seller, blue favors the buyer. You can see these numbers are pretty low. Santa Clara County is basically under 10%. There are some that are, 15%. But, you either, maybe the way to look at this is you're either around 7% or you're at 15% for Santa Clara County. You come up into San Mateo County, and again, the numbers are all over the place from 0 to 5.4, but 5% of your sellers are doing a price reduction. That's not very significant. Alameda County is probably the most significant price reductions, 8%, 6%, 7.5%, 15%, 17%. Again, that's still less than 1 in 5 sellers. It's about 1 in 6 if I'm doing my math right. Looking at overbid, this is what the buyers are doing. Now, this is lagging indicators. Up until this point, we've been looking at basically leading indicators, indicators that don't have a delay. Now we're looking at sale price, and in order to get sale price, escrows have to close. So this is where the market was 4, 5, and 6 weeks ago, and that's why it's more optimistic, redder in color, where the overbids are up around 13%. I would be surprised if the overbids that are happening today, the offers that are being negotiated today, are that high. There's no way to know until we report it and the escrows close. You can see San Mateo County is quite a bit lower. Alameda County is closer to Santa Clara County, but still lower than basically 6 to 12%. This is the frequency of overbidding. So how common is overbidding? And overbidding stays higher for longer than the magnitude. And that's why it's important to look at both. But here you're saying 88, 85% in a lot of the areas. 70% appears to be the low for Santa Clara County, except for South County. So that means only 7 out of 10 sellers to 9 out of 10 sellers are getting more than their asking price. You come up into San Mateo County, it's a little bit more varied. The coast, only 1 in 3 sellers are getting more than their asking price. The expensive areas is 1 in every other seller is getting more. And then the bulk, the more affordable areas are right around 3/4 of the sellers are getting more than their asking price. You go into Alameda County, and again, it's a lot more like Santa Clara County. Basically, 80 to 88% of the sellers are getting more than their asking price. So 12 to 20% of the sellers are getting their asking price or less, because to be an overbid, it has to be over. So it does not include those that are at asking price. And that number does vary, but it's a reasonable number. When the people getting overbid is so high, it's a relatively small number just because there's so few sellers left that aren't getting overbid. Now, here's the long-term appreciation, and this is very telling. Look where the red is. That's where you've had the most appreciation. It's the affordable outlying areas, and the blue areas are the areas that have had the least appreciation, which are the sort of sought-after areas historically along the peninsula. So that's very telling. I believe this is directly related to the pandemic and buyers more willing to take on longer commutes. Here's sold price, and instead of just following the median price, which is the middle number, I sandwich it by putting in the lowest 10 percentile and the highest 90 percentile price as well, so you know the range. So the outlying areas are where the areas that are more affordable, and the areas that are having the higher appreciation. The pinker areas up on the peninsula were the areas that were not having a lot of appreciation. And then in Santa Clara County, this area was probably sort of in between on the appreciation. Here's a summary of what we went over, and I've added the payment on the far right-hand column, but you can start on the left, which are your micro markets, or you can start on the right column, which is your affordability, either monthly payments or purchase price range, and then you can see what the conditions are. The active inventory by itself doesn't tell you what the market conditions are, because you could have a lot of inventory and a lot of sales, and that would be a balanced marketplace. The same with the offers. But once you start getting into the ratio, this is telling you whether the market's faster, and that's why it's highlighted in yellow. These are sort of the current indicators of what the market is doing, whether it be days of unsold inventory compared to the 10-year median, much more pessimistic, much more favoring the buyer than just looking at the raw count. Now, raw count is what people feel in the field. This is how quickly a buyer has to act and how quickly a seller can expect. The layman's term here, days on marketplace, and again, I'm not following the average or the median because each of those has a significant problem. I have settled on the long typical seller, which I define as the 75th percentile. Moving over is the ask price adjustments, and you can see that sort of balanced. And then the frequency of price reductions is very low, so favoring the sellers. Then these are lagging indicators because this again requires the price. But you can see across the board, these are very favorable for the seller, red in color, and then the appreciation. So that's a recap of the slides that we went over. Now what we're doing is leaving micro markets and looking at all of Silicon Valley. So this is all 20 micro market areas, all 3 counties, and we're looking at inventory. And you can see inventory has been climbing pretty rapidly, and we're still below where we are based on the 10-year median. If I would pick a number, I would basically say inventory is at 85%, but offers are down here at about 79%. And because the offers are lower than the inventory, even though they're both below 100%, that gives you days of unsold inventory up here above 100%, which is a slower marketplace. So we're now have a slightly slower marketplace than we typically do, but it's still very reasonable. I don't think anybody's going to say the market's very slow, but it is definitely slowing. This slide's up here mostly for the last line on here. And again, I don't want to keep harping on it, but this is, to me, important, and it may be becoming more important right now. The lack of buyers, 2,318 offers accepted in the past 5 weeks. The only year where we had less was 2020, and that was the pandemic. And you can see the pandemic bottomed out at just under 1,200, and it's already up to 1,500. So this is going to come up pretty rapidly. And before long, we're going to be the 10th slowest year out of the past 10 and the 25th slowest year out of the past 25. That's why I include this slide. Yes, all the numbers on here are accurate, I believe, but it's just sort of what the current market's doing. Now what we're doing is looking at the estimated payments. So the cheapest home in Silicon Valley is going to be about $7,500 on your monthly PITI payment, assuming an 80% loan at the national average. Your median priced home is just under 14,000, probably about 13,900. And your most expensive home is just north of $27,000 a month. Now, typically, someone buying the most expensive home is not going to do an 80% loan, but that's what the payments were. And I put this on here because the payments are more important, in my opinion, than the price of the house. People don't buy a house based on the price of the house. They buy it basically on what the monthly payment is typically. Now what we're doing is we're looking at the ask price reductions. The blue dotted line here is where we were a year ago. The green dotted dashed line is where we are this year. So we are significantly above where we were last year, not as much above as we were last week, but you can also see that we're clearly below the peak up here. So about 3 weeks ago is when the sellers were taking the fewest price reductions. That indicates either sellers were starting to anticipate the market running up, or sellers are overestimating the marketplace basically, or the market slowing. And we'll just step through a week at a time. Initially, it's a month at a time, and then at 3 months, I flip over and do weekly. There's sort of the bottom, and there's the rapid up creek 11 weeks ago, 9. You can see now we jumped up. There's the peak about 6 weeks ago. up through 2 weeks ago, and just in the last 1 week ago and this past week, we've come down fairly significantly. And again, that's the magnitude of the ask price reductions. It's the distribution where you plot every one on the graph. Same thing with the overbidding. This is the worst week we ever had down here, which was November 30th of 2001, sort of at the fallout of World Trade Center. World Trade Center, of course, was 9/11. People basically hunkered down for a while, and then those escrows had to close, which was a 5-week delay. And then the market, we got into that nesting urge and the surge, the recovery afterwards. The best we ever had was just November 29th, 2022. And if you think about it, take off my 5 weeks, you're back into February. So the market peaked actually in February of 2022, even though most people not looking at hard factual data would say the peak of the market was probably in April or May of 2022. Here we are going through week by week or month by month initially. There's the bottom, and now you're coming up, and this is weekly data. And here you're going to see we're still at the peak. So you're still climbing. We're sort of at a plateau, but you're still, your green dash dotted line up here is the highest line we had, and this is where we were a year ago. Overbidding is significantly higher, but again, that's where the market was 4, 5, 6 weeks ago. Now what we're doing is showing the annual cycle. The gray line is where you'd expect the market to be. Red line is lack of inventory favoring the seller. Blue line is a lot of inventory favoring the buyer. Look at the pull away here, and it's the vertical separation that's important. This is where if the market was continuing hot like it was up through the end of March, you'd be down here on the red line. Instead, it's really climbing. So we're getting a lot more inventory on the marketplace. Here you can see the climb in the marketplace. We were down at some point down around 70% of the marketplace. Just last week, we made it up to probably about 86%. This week, we're probably about 81.5%. Here's the number of offers, and concept's the same. It's the vertical separation. These lines are a lot more similar. So even though the inventory on the previous slide was climbing significantly away from the red line, here on offers, the lack of offers is not climbing significantly away from the blue line. It's climbing some, but not significantly. And here you can see you got down to basically at 70% for a long term, and you've gone from 70% to 76% almost. So that's the climb. It's not as dramatic as the climb on active inventory, but it's still climbing. Now you're looking at days of unsold inventory. Here you can see that it's done a pretty U, but if you look at the typical marketplace, for whatever reason, there's typically a U in the marketplace here. This year, the U was, if you look at it, is back here just after March 31st. So part of this dip down was the holiday, and the holiday was Cesar Chavez and Easter at the same weekend. So that's your dip down. So this U was afterwards. This is only the last couple of weeks. So I have no explanation. There is no holiday, and that could be just fluctuation. But when you're looking at 3 counties, you wouldn't expect fluctuation, but that just shows you how unstable and how important it is to try to correct your data in a manner that you're taking into consideration seasonal cycles. So here's the holiday downward dip, here's the upward dip, and now we've come back down. It could be simply the lag time of the marketplace. Right after the holidays, you expect a flood of inventory, which would cause the days of unsold inventory to come up, which is a cooling of the marketplace. And then if the market absorbed that inventory, it would come back down. So it could be as simple as it took an extra week or two to absorb the after holiday rush. Here's the long typical seller. I use the 75th percentile to try to get away from these steps that you're clearly seeing here. That's going to happen anytime the market's fast, because there's just not much of a difference. But that was why I picked the 75th percentile. You can see that we're down here basically at one of the fastest marketplaces. The only time we were faster was 2020 and early 2022, following the normal trend of the marketplace, but still a very quick pace market. Here's the same information on compared to normal. So now we took that gray line and pulled it straight, and then what's data doing? So right now you're up here around 85%. So you're 15% faster marketing times than you would expect. Here's the seller ask price reduction. This line I would say is right now following the typical line fairly closely, and definitely a little bit on the cool side. So sellers are taking slightly larger price reductions than you would expect for this time of the year, but the pattern is normal. Here you can see the normal. This is a very tight metrics. This is 99. So this would probably be like 99.9%. So 1/10 of a 1%. That's the average. That's everybody, including the sellers that don't take any price reduction. Now, because it's such a tight market, I'm throwing away 90% of the marketplace and only looking at the 10% of the sellers that are taking the biggest price reduction. And you can see those 10% that are taking the big price reductions have dramatically increased the size of their price reduction. They were up here at an 8% price reduction, and now they're at 10% price reduction. 2%, it may not sound like a lot, but you can see on this graph, that's a pretty major move. The whole move from the slowest marketplace at 80 to the peak marketplace at 100% is only 20. So we've done 1/10 of the entire range that you would expect the data to be, and we did it basically in maybe 2 or 3 weeks. Here's the frequency of the price reduction. So the frequency is right on normal and following. I mean, you can't get a better line than this. You almost think I didn't plot the gray line. You can see the gray line a little bit right there and a little bit right there, but basically the current data is right on there. So the frequency of the sellers taking price reductions is completely normal. With the magnitude of the top 10% being higher, that means the sellers that are taking price reductions are taking larger price reductions. Here it is compared to normal, and you can see that you've been right about on both sides of 100%. Here's the overbid magnitude. And again, overbidding is now, gray line is where you'd expect it to be. You're significantly above the gray line. So the amount of overbidding is quite a bit higher. But again, this is stuff that happened 4, 5, 6 weeks ago and a lagging indicator onto compared to normal. So what we do here is we take out the seasonal cycle and just look. So basically, you're sort of having a climb here. So basically, since 2023, the market's been getting more and more aggressive with overbidding. Yes, there was a little bit of a low time at the end of the year holidays, but there's a lot of things that happen with the end of the year holidays. So in general, what I would do is read the market as just climbing and getting more aggressive with the buyers overbidding more commonly and more higher frequency and larger dollar amounts. This is the frequency. So you can see that in the last, this is basically April 1st. So in the last 45 days, 40 days, we've pulled away from the typical marketplace now, and we're getting more frequent overbidding. So frequency has increased, how common it is. Here's compared to normal. And now we have the sale price, and you can see sale prices still just sort of doing that rollover that I talked about. I think it was 2 weeks ago I first mentioned it, that it looked like the line was rolling over. And again, it looks like it's rolling over. It rolls over every year. When it rolls over is different time frame, but it's usually sometime during the second quarter that it rolls over. It's not completely flat yet, but and again, this was 5 weeks ago. What the market's doing now is probably completely flat. Now we're leaving Silicon Valley as a whole, and we're looking at the 3 counties that make up Silicon Valley, whether it be Santa Clara County in the blue, San Mateo County in the orange, or Alameda County in the gray. San Mateo County has the smallest geographical and the least population, and therefore it's got the least amount of active inventory. You can see historically Alameda and Santa Clara County are fairly close together. Right now, Santa Clara County has a lot less inventory than Alameda. So you'd expect Santa Clara County to be faster paced than Alameda. Then the offers accepted. Santa Clara County with less inventory has more offers expected. And that's why when we get there, the days of unsold inventory for Santa Clara County should be the Alameda County is in the second place, and San Mateo County, because of its side, has the least amount of offers accepted. Here's your days of unsold inventory. Santa Clara County is the lowest by quite a bit, down at 24 days of unsold inventory. Alameda and San Mateo County are fairly close together, about 41 days for San Mateo County, and it looks like about 37 days for Alameda County. Here's the long typical seller. Santa Clara County is the fastest. It basically looks like 13 days, maybe. Yeah, 13 days. San Mateo County at 14 and Alameda County at 16. All 3 relatively fast, You can see that we're typically fast during the second quarter. Where we're slow is at the end of the year, but basically most of the time we come out of the holidays and drop like a rock, and then we slow down over the year and then drop like a rock and repeat, and we rinse and repeat. And you can see the column. One thing I haven't said this week is my x-axis is condensed starting back before January 1st, 2023, and that's so I can fit in 10 years worth of data. I wanted to give a full year so you can see the cycle, and then the current data spread out so you can see trends. Here's your magnitude of list price reductions. So you can see all three are pretty close together. And again, it's a very tight metric, with Santa Clara County surprisingly doing the most price reductions at somewhere around 99.4%, so 0.6% reduction. I'm not seeing where San Mateo County is because it's covered by Santa Clara, but it looks like Alameda County is popping up here at about 99.6, so 0.4% reduction. All very close together, not very much in magnitude. And here you can see in San Mateo County, there's basically no price reductions. And by none, you know, it's 6.5% roughly, but your other two counties are at 10%. So San Mateo County has been doing slower or less well than the other two counties. Sellers have been used to that. So sellers coming on the market now are pricing accordingly, and they're doing less price adjustments, where Santa Clara and Alameda County have been doing aggressively well. Sellers tend to anticipate that, don't expect the market to change. The market does typically slow down. The heat of the market's the 5 weeks before Memorial Day typically, and that's where we are right now. And you're going in that slowing period, so they've overestimated where the market was going to go. Here's the magnitude of the buyers. Santa Clara County and Alameda County very close. Alameda County's on top, which might surprise people with the slower marketplace that it had. You wouldn't expect it. You'd expect overbidding to go with the more speed of the market, but it could be affordability. Buyers are desperate to get in, and they're going over to Alameda County, and they're going in and overbidding. Part of me also would say that typically Alameda County has slightly lower appreciation because of people are going there for affordability. But where that changed is, you know, you look back before March of 2020, and all three lines are together. And then since March of 2020, the Alameda County has been on the top. That's basically telling me buyers are willing to commute further because of remote working, more flexible work schedules, and that's pulling the overbidding up in Alameda County. Here's the frequency of overbidding. Overbidding is the most in Alameda County, followed closely by Santa Clara, and San Mateo County is the least, but still only 30% are not getting overbid. So 70% of the sellers, 7 out of 10 sellers, are getting more than their asking price. Here's the appreciation. It's the highest for Santa Clara County at 208%. So you've more than doubled your money in Santa Clara County. In second place now is San Mateo County at just 188%, and Alameda County is slowest at 182%. So you're still 82%. You haven't quite doubled your money, but you're coming very close. Here's your price. San Mateo County did a fairly significant run up in price from just last week. So the amount of people that are upside down now is a very small window back in 2022. Santa Clara County is above their 2022 window. Alameda County is the area that's got the most people that would be upside down, people that would have paid higher than the median prices right now. And in part, that's because Alameda County actually came down in price in the last week. And that means that their price actually went down that 4, 5, 6 weeks ago with the offers negotiated. Same information on regular paper in case you prefer. Here's your estimated payment. San Mateo County went up with their payment increase. Santa Clara County went down because interest rates on the national level went down, as did the 10 percentile. This shows you that even though interest rates went down, the price in the most expensive homes was so great that their payments continued to go up. Here's the raw numbers for you, whether you want to look at Santa Clara, San Mateo, or Alameda County, or Silicon Valley as a whole. You can look down and figure out whatever metric you're looking at for whatever reason, whether you want the fastest marketplace or the slowest marketplace, the most overbidding, the least overbidding, whatever it is that's important to you. You can see inventory is still growing 44% in San Mateo County, only slightly less than 1% in Santa Clara for a 2% overall increase in inventory. Now we're leaving Silicon Valley and going into the greater Bay Area. We'll do this by looking at 5 regions. One of the regions is Silicon Valley, followed by the cities, North Bay, Central Valley, and Central Coast. We're going to start off with the data. Again, you can pick out whatever is of interest for you. You can now see that Santa Clara and San Mateo County are above both San Francisco and Marin. The whole Silicon Valley is basically above Silicon Valley of San Francisco, but still below Marin. So Marin's still slightly more expensive. The only reason Silicon Valley is as low as it is it's weighted down by Alameda County. Here's your inventory. You can see inventory in all areas is growing, but you have to come back and look and see what inventory is normally growing at this time of the year. North Bay has the most inventory. Santa Clara and Central Valley are very similar, which means Silicon Valley is closer to normal, because if you come back here historically, Silicon Valley is half the inventory as Central Coast in rough terms, and here they're the same. So for whatever reason, Silicon Valley has more inventory than the Central Valley and more than North Bay. North Bay is a little bit closer, but still Santa Clara, Silicon Valley has the most. Here's the offers accepted. And again, you can see that all 3 are historically pretty close together. And here, Silicon Valley has got the most offers, with North Bay and Central Valley being close together. Then finally down to the cities and the Central Coast having the least, just because they're smaller geographically. And that's the problem of looking at just the raw count, which is why I don't do it too much. But so many people want it, it's there for them. Now you're looking at this ratio between the two. So the slowest area is the Central Coast. The fastest is Silicon Valley. The other 3 are pretty close together. I guess maybe from 48 down to maybe 42. So only a 6-day range. Here's the long typical seller. This might make a little bit more sense. So Silicon Valley is down at 13 days. Central Valley is second at 21 days. San Francisco Marin is third at 23 days. North Bay is at probably 31 days, and the slowest is the Central Coast at 40 days. And again, I can't reiterate this enough, even though I'm saying the slowest is 40 days, to sell 3/4 of your inventory in just over a month in 6 weeks is still very respectable. Here is your ask price reductions. Silicon Valley the least. The cities and the Central Coast very close together at the bottom, and in between you have the Central Valley in second place and North Bay in third place. Frequency of seller price reductions, least frequent in Silicon Valley, followed by the cities, followed by the Central Coast. So even though the Central Coast is the slowest area, the sellers there don't reduce their price as much as they do in the North Bay and the Central Valley. So the Central Valley is faster, but doing more price reductions. Here's the overbidding. The highest amount of overbidding right now is the cities. It came up fairly significantly the last week. Silicon Valley is in second place, North Bay, Central Valley, and the least amount of overbidding at essentially 100% is the Central Coast. So in the Central Coast, there's basically very little overbidding. Here's the frequency. And when I say very little overbidding, got to put it in terms, 44%. So you can't, if you were saying there was, almost half the sellers are getting more than their asking price, even though it averages out to getting their asking price. Silicon Valley has the most at 78%. Cities at second at about 72%. North Bay and the Central Valleys are very close together. I'd say that's about 55% of the sellers getting more than their asking price. This total appreciation, Silicon Valley the absolute most, San Francisco doing the worst, and like Central Valley taking off and Alameda County taking off with the pandemic, the city's tanked with the pandemic. So there's no question in my mind this stuff is pandemic related. Here's your sold price. The cities in Silicon Valley very close together. Central Coast in third place. North Bay and the Central Valley the most affordable. There should be the monthly payments that are going to be in the same order. And with that, we've talked about week 19 here in Silicon Valley, May 11th. Long-term, I'm changing it to Silicon Valley real estate data, deleting the word market. So my root URL is changing to SVRED. I made a typo this morning that I couldn't recover from. I was planning on doing this at the end of the year, so I'm throwing it in there now. I will try to keep both going for a while, but sorry for the confusion. So I will take out the word market there, and going forward, delete the word market, and the word graph gets replaced with data. With that, I'm open for any questions. Not seeing any unmuted mics, so I'll wrap it up. Thanks for joining. Have a great week. Take care. Bye for now.